It was barely dawn, the sun no more than an echo of a distant hope. 3 shadowy figures emerged on their languid way to the strangely brooding carriage. The relentless fog still rested heavily on the neighbouring meadow, reluctant to unveil the field of golden barley subdued by its gloom.
Ian, mate?
Yes, Simon?
What are you doing?
Well, you see, today we're going to be meeting a veritable storytelling genius, and so I thought it would be apposite to start the show with a suitably literary retelling of our journey here this morning. You know, I was hoping to be lyrical, creative, to use a bit of imagination.
You're an accountant, mate.
Oh, yes. That's probably where I was going wrong.
And actually, it was quite a pleasant morning when we left. I don't think any of us was shadowy, and it wasn't a brooding carriage, it was a BMW.
Oh, well, so much for towering prose. But luckily, as I said, we are going to be chatting today with a master of the art, aren't we, mate?
We are indeed, Ian. None other than Bob Hartman, perhaps best known for writing the seminal Lion Storyteller Bible. Bob has over 100 books published around the world. He is, of course, a much-loved professional storyteller, and he is also an ordained minister.
Yes, originally from the good old US of A, Bob is now based in the good old U of K and resides in England's delightful West Country, which is where we have made our way today aboard our brooding carriage.
A BMW, mate.
Yes, OK, Mr. Pedantic. Anyway, Simon, shall we get on with the show?
Yes, I think it would be wise.
Right. Hello, everyone. I'm Ian Wishart, he's Simon Clark, and this is the Take a Pew podcast with the Reverend Bob Hartman.
Bob Hartman!
And here we are indeed in the historic county of Wiltshire in the west of England, and more specifically in the town of Trowbridge. Just 8 miles from the city of Bath, and interestingly just 203 miles from Doncaster. And we're here, of course, to meet local resident and our guest this time, author and professional storyteller, Bob Hartman. Bob, thank you for having us, and please take a pew.
Thank you very much, and welcome to Wiltshire.
Hello, Bob. It's great to meet you. Perhaps you could just introduce yourself to our lovely listeners.
Lovely. My name is Bob Hartman, and I'm 67 years old. I have 1 wife and 2 children, 5 grandchildren. I was ordained originally in 1980, and I attend church at the place where we're actually hanging out right now, but I don't have a role here. I am a storyteller and an author.
Well, we're looking forward to opening up the book of the Hartman life and times so far, including a number of rather quirky chapters covering your favourite things, your fabulous dinner party, the mysteriously titled Is It True, and the rather more essential reading that is your spiritual pearl of wisdom.
Yes, and of course the gripping twist in the tale entitled Simon's Random Question.
I think that's more of an apologetic footnote, Simon. But, Bob, let's open the book and turn to page 1. Where did life start for you? I understand it was somewhere that smelt of olive tapenade.
Olive tapenade? Pittsburgh, PA.
That's exactly.
Yeah. Smelled a lot more of steel and coal and, fire and fumes in the sky. Oh, my word. When I was growing up, you'd go up and down the rivers and it was just steel being made everywhere. Very industrial. When the steel industry collapsed in the 1980s, sadly, Pittsburgh had to reinvent itself. And has done so magnificently. It's hospitals and high-tech stuff now. But when I was growing up, it was a completely different place.
So give us a flavour of the home environment, if you like, the family unit. And
I was originally born in the city, and we lived for the first probably 6 years of my life actually in the city itself, which is where my mom and dad lived. Dad would talk about walking to school in the morning, and the pollution was so bad, he would have to wash his face when he got there. I mean, it was just, it was very, very industrial. And as I say, still very industrial when I was growing up. But when I was, maybe 6 or 7, we moved to one of the near suburbs, a place called Kilbuck Township, into a little house, on a hill. And there was me and my mom and my dad. And at that time, 2 brothers and a younger sister. And then many, many years later, my other younger sister appeared.
Oh, okay.
I was 20 years old when, Jody made her appearance. Yeah.
Gosh, impressive. Well, those early years bring us to our first standing feature of the show. We have a question for you, and that question is...
What were you like at school? Were you a little bit geeky? Or were you a little bit freaky? Or were you a little bit cheeky? What were you like at school?
I'll opt for the first. Yeah, very much part of the geeky group, I would say. I mean, there were 3 or 4 of us who hung out, particularly in high school, and we're still very close.
Oh, that's nice.
Very interesting. It was quite cool, actually, because I went to a little church that was actually still in the city, where my mum and dad had met many years earlier, and I invited my 2 friends, Scott and Rick, to kind of come along with me, and they became Christians, and both became ministers.
Oh, wow.
So it's quite nice, really. We're coming up to our 50th high school reunion, actually, which takes place later in the year, and we're just trying to decide what to do. Because actually, we've hung out with each other forever, and it's kind of like, well, do we want to just hang out together that night or go find some people we haven't seen for 50 years? I don't know. But, that decision has yet to be made.
Wow, it's quite a landmark, though, 50 years of that.
I know.
So what made you geeky then with the guys?
Rick was very artistic.
Yeah.
Scott was very much into math. And I was just one of those kids who just, tried to do his best in all the subjects. And so, we were kind of part of that crowd, certainly not the sporty crowd. I mean, we were artsy, but that was kind of off on the edges as well, really.
Did you have any particular hobbies back then?
Pretty much what I do today. I mean, I like to read, I like to work on cars, and I like music. So those 3 things. Yeah.
So
I don't play anything or anything, but I just really like it.
And you mentioned the church angle. So was it a church-going family that you were in?
Yes. Yeah, my parents were Christians. Interesting background there. They both grew up in the same neighborhood called Shadeland Marshall, which is one of the inner city neighborhoods of Pittsburgh. And my dad's dad was an atheist. Quite a confirmed atheist, to be honest. But my dad said that one morning when he was little, he had 2 older sisters. My granddad got them up on a Sunday morning and said, listen, you kids need to learn how to behave right. So just go out there and find a church somewhere and go. Maybe they'll teach you how to behave well. I don't know. So it was the weirdest thing. So off they wandered, and the nearest church was the one that my dad then grew up in, became a Christian at, and where he met my mom.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay. It's actually where I met my wife, actually, as well. So, yeah.
Quite an important church in the Hartman family, by the sound of it. And did you go on to college after school?
Yes. Yeah. I originally went to the University of Pittsburgh to study English with an emphasis on writing. But at the end of that year, both Scott and myself went off to help at a Christian camp and felt a call to ministry there.
Oh, right. Okay.
So then we transferred to a Bible college and ended up pursuing ministry that way.
So just as we draw a line there, it brings us to our second standing feature, which is...
What's your fondest childhood memory? What's your fondest of all your childhood memories? What's your fondest?
Oh,
yes. That is a nice question. And I've got an answer, I do.
Yeah.
When I was in 6th grade, and that would have made me about 11-ish, I think, very first Friday of term, our 6th grade teacher, who was a guy, hadn't had that many guy teachers up to that point, but he was a guy, Mr. McKee. He pulled all the curtains shut on the room, turned the lights down, reached behind his desk and pulled out a copy of The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And every Friday afternoon during term, he read us a chapter from that. Now, I was not familiar with the book, not familiar with the series. I've joked in the past that that's because it had just come out, but actually it had been out for about 10 years by then. But anyway, so he read that to us, and and not only did it get me excited about what C.S. Lewis did and his amazing stories, but I think it was one of the first sort of hints that that's the kind of career that I would pursue, that it would be involved, that writing would be involved in it in some way or another. It just inspired me and made me want to be a writer and to make people feel the way I felt when, I read and heard his stuff.
Did you want to read ahead? Were you tempted to get hold of the book?
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, not only did I want to, but like when I went home that night, I said to my mom, "Can we go to the library? I got to find more of these books." So I had no idea that there was a whole series. I just thought there was the one. So, and I wasn't the only one in the class to do it. It was a wonderful thing. Probably something you couldn't get away with in school these days because things are much, more strictly programmed. But he had the flexibility to do that, and it was brilliant.
Yeah, quite bold in a way.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
Wonderful. So that's a lovely, fond memory. We like fond memories and quite forming.
Absolutely, no question.
Yeah, very good. Okay, so back then to college, Bible college. So you made a decision pretty quickly then to get into this whole ministry lark.
Yes. I mean, it took a little while because it was college, and then both Scott and I did like the master's degrees, in seminary, so that we were hopefully more effectively trained to be ministers. I don't know, you could argue one way or the other about that, but we did go to do that. And then while we were there, one of our professors did a sabbatical in the UK, became acquainted with some churches over here. And eventually he said, some of these churches are looking for a young minister to come and et cetera and so forth, would you be willing to do that? So we both, agreed to do that. Scott went to Selston in Nottinghamshire, and I went to Wigston Magna in Leicestershire, and we pastored churches there for about 8 years.
Gosh.
Yeah.
So what a random place to end up in, coming from Pennsylvania.
Yeah, it was incredibly random. I mean, really, it was definitely not in the plan.
Yeah.
Anywhere, but I think God does that, doesn't he? He just kind of surprises you with, you're going to go do that. I was going to go back to Pittsburgh and work in an inner city ministry. But, this door opened and, the rest is kind of history. Yeah.
Did you have to think long and hard about that? Or?
Well, we did. I mean, obviously, my wife, I was married by that time. So, we prayed about it. And there were some long discussions with my parents. It was a long way. I mean, in those days, it felt much further away than I think it would today because of the difficulty of communication, etc., price of airfare, that kind of thing. But in the end, we felt like that's what we were supposed to do. So off we went.
And to the extent you had any vision, if you like, how did you see your ministry journey happening at that point? Because obviously you're renowned for storytelling and you're the artistic expression that you have, as opposed to, say, just leading a congregation in a church.
Well, I think it was one of those things where I was always drawn more to the communication side of ministry than any other side. That probably sounds awful, but I mean, that's, I think every minister is drawn, one direction or another. And that was always kind of my thing. As a matter of fact, when I was in seminary, I don't know if you're familiar with Frederick Buechner's book on preaching called Telling the Truth.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, Gospel of Tragedy, Comedy, and Fairy Tale. And it's a phenomenal book. And it cemented, I think, for me, the idea that one could exercise one's sort of literary aspirations in the form of a sermon. That it could be, something really, really special. And that it could have that kind of literary dimension to it. So I tried to weave that into my sermons for those 8 years that I was here. And also did a lot of retelling of Bible stories, largely because our church had a lot of people who knew Bible stories. It was an older congregation to start with. And you'd start into a Bible story and you'd get that been there, done that look, we know where you're going. So I started to retell the Bible stories from different angles, which then kind of resulted in this sort of stuff that I got published. Yeah. I mean, one of the parishioners said, "Look, why don't you try and get these published?" And I thought, well, we'll see. But eventually that's what happened.
And what was the first thing that happened with?
Well, it didn't happen with a Bible story to start with.
Right.
I had moved back to the States by then. This was the late 80s, and had got involved with my brother. He'd been involved in children's theater. So we put a storytelling theater group together, him and I. And then I started to do the writing. And I wasn't sure which direction I was going to go with it, but I wrote some children's things and some adult things. So the first book that was actually accepted was called Lobster for Lunch.
Yeah.
And it was by a little company in Maine, Down East Books. And they only ever did one kid's book a year, but the story was about a lobster. So they took that. And then it was after that, I think the second book, Lion Hudson, picked up. And even that wasn't a retelling of a Bible story. It was just a story about a little boy. And then finally I did something called Angels, Angels All Around for them, which then was the biblical storytelling. retelling.
Right, that was the breakthrough.
Yeah.
So how did you link a lobster into a story?
You know, you go to these restaurants that have the tanks, and you can pick the lobster and they take it out and they boil it. Well, my wife loves lobster, and so we used to do that a lot, and the kids always complained. So it was a story about a little boy who didn't want his mom to eat the lobster, and how he managed to avoid the lobster being, consumed. So in the end, it wasn't lobster for lunch at all.
Fantastic.
It's it was like a vegetarian adventure. I don't know. Anyway,
I've always thought that situation of choosing a live is to eat and then know it's going to get slaughtered and then you're going to eat it. It's a traumatic event, isn't it?
It is. I've never done it, but I mean, as I say, my wife's nuts about lobster, so there you go.
I couldn't do that.
No, if you had to do the same with a cow, it would be entertaining, wouldn't it?
Oh yeah,
Sort of looking
we'll have that one.
For example. Anyway, it's all a bit.
Well, doesn't that happen in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy? Don't they bring that beast along and he says, "Oh yeah, you want a bit of my loin here?" Or that's the best bit. Doesn't that happen?
Yes, anyway, lobster for lunch. So you're back in the States by now. So, and are you solely pursuing a writing thing at that point? Yeah.
I mean, I'm involved in my church there, and eventually, kind of was hired on part time as a worship minister. But on the whole, Tim and I are traveling around, eventually on behalf of the Pittsburgh Children's Museum, to schools doing storytelling assemblies, and also pursuing the writing side.
Right. And so after the Angels, you were wholly focused on Bible-based or whatever.
Pretty much so. I mean, I think when I had always appreciated Lion Hudson's work, when we were here, and we used a lot of their books. I guess it was just Lion Publishing at the time. So I thought, well, the kind of stuff I was writing was the kind of stuff that would appeal to them. They had a U.S. office at the time, so I actually ended up sending stuff there, and that's where they picked up Angels, Angels All Around. And then they approached me and said, we're interested in doing some kind of different way of, a Bible for children. What do you think? And I said, well, I'm a storyteller at the moment, so why don't we do a storytelling-based Bible, for storytellers to kind of bring to life. And that's where the Storyteller Bible came from.
Which has been a massive success, obviously, hasn't it? Is it 30 years-ish since?
We're coming up to 30 years. It'll be 2025 will be 30 years. Yeah. And of course, it's been used by the Open the Book program.
Yes.
So it's in many, many, many schools in the UK and abroad.
Great impact. Others, colleagues of mine, use Open the Book at our local primary school, and it's very popular. But I must say, some of the performers who are not normally performers, they rather seem to relish putting tea cloths around their head and that sort of thing too.
Oh, you mean the Open the Book guys?
Yes.
It wouldn't happen without them. It was just amazing. I mean, just prior to COVID, we had our 20th anniversary. And at that time, we had something like 17,000 storytellers trained across the country. We were in like 3,500 schools. And I think probably that number has backed off a bit because of the difficulties associated with COVID. But I'm on tour at the moment, introducing the new material that I've written. So it's 90 news stories written in the Storyteller Bible style, just to refresh everything and give the storytellers an opportunity to use something new and that's perhaps a bit more appropriate to this day and age.
Right. So that's no mean feat, is it? 90 stories.
No. No. I mean, they said
it must have taken at least an hour.
It was at least an hour.
Yeah.
It was the second half of 2021. That's what it took.
Right.
So it was like a story, I don't know, a couple of stories a week or something like that. I don't know. Anyway, I was on a schedule, and we just kind of kept working through it.
Does Little Bob ever make an appearance?
The little animated version.
Yeah.
Yes. No, that was exclusively for the lever services.
Oh, was it?
At Gloucester Cathedral. Yes.
All right, okay.
In COVID.
That.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just keeping geographical track, you obviously ended up back in the UK.
Yes. In 2000, moved back here. Yeah.
Okay. And so you went back into ministry, church ministry, did you, when you came back? Or?
Well, yeah, but that was kind of an accident.
Okay.
So we moved back. So we moved back here. Two folks who had been deacons in our church in Leicestershire had in the interim moved down here. So whenever I came back to the UK, I would come back to this part of the world because Dave and Jack were here, and it was just a nice opportunity to hang out with them. And I really fell in love with the area. It's beautiful around here. I love it. So when we moved back, we thought, well, we'd come back here. And the church here was between ministers at that particular time. So we needed someplace to rent, to live. And so we ended up renting the manse. And one thing led to another. And I ended up pastoring the church for 5 years or so.
As you do, yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
But still obviously writing, and over that, I mean, you've written, is it over 100 books?
Yeah, it's over 100 books.
That's
something
amazing,
like that.
isn't it?
Yeah. So I didn't stop writing. I mean, that was always kind of part of the deal. Wherever I was serving, the idea was, well, as long as I can keep on writing and doing the odd visit, here to schools, churches, conferences, whatever.
So most of your time you will spend writing rather than performing?
It depends.
Or storytelling? Do you...
It's kind of fluctuated over the years because sometimes there's been more performing and less writing, and sometimes it's gone the other way. I'm certainly at a stage now where there's more writing than performing, but I think it's partly because I'm getting older and my grandkids live around the corner, and it's just nice to have that freedom and flexibility, whereas you wouldn't have that if you were, on the road all the time.
So where do your ideas come from, Bob?
It really just depends. I mean, the process is the same every time. So say somebody asks me to do, like a whole Bible. Okay. So together we would choose which stories we think were appropriate from Old Testament and New. And then I'd take a look at each individual story, read it in the text, take it apart, characters, setting, conflict, like you would with any story. And having looked at that, try and put it back together in a way that you could tell out loud. So some interactive stuff and maybe some dialogue and the opportunity for the crowd to get involved, but that sort of thing. So that is usually the process. And the actual stories that are chosen depend on kind of what the publisher wants.
Because there's some quite challenging bits, aren't there? And do you ever sort of think, well, I'll avoid that one, or I'm not going to go there, or do you just take it head on and think, right, I'm going to...
Again, it depends. I mean, I have I've done retellings of some of the more challenging ones, Ehud and Eglon, and the old sword getting lost in the king's belly and all that kind of stuff. And I can remember, it was in Bible Baddies many years ago for Lion. And I can remember the editors going, oh, that's a bit much. And I'm like, no, the kids will love it. A little bit of gore goes a long way. But like in the Open the Book stories, we get this question every time we go on tour. And we had it this past week. Somebody puts up their hand and says, oh, we feel a bit funny telling that story where the baby gets cut in half. And I say, listen, I tell everybody this, it's the story where the baby doesn't get cut in half. That's the whole point. The point is, by God's grace, Solomon has the wisdom to actually avoid the baby being cut in half. So it's that kind of thing. I think it depends how you address those more difficult stories.
Yeah, so you mentioned the new stories, and you're working on a Clever Cub series at the moment. Oh, was that?
That's David C. Cook, and that's been huge fun. Originally, I had this idea of a character called Sleepy Bear, and Cook liked the idea, but they wanted a bear character that would kind of would move beyond just bedtime. So Clever Cub kind of came to life as a result of that. And it's just really a way of encouraging parents and kids to consider Bible stories together. So Clever Cub has these issues, things pop up in his life, and his mom or his dad, or sometimes both of them, help him through it by introducing him to a Bible story. They're very simple and they're really very basic, but they're lovely, really, really nice illustrations, and I hope something that parents can use quite easily with their kids.
Sounds fun.
Yeah.
What do you think is the state of the role of drama in church, in worship at the moment? Is it?
I think it moves all over the place, and I think a lot of it has to do with the abilities of people in any given congregation. It's like anything. I mean, it's like preaching, it's like worship. It's just another artistic expression, and it can either be really good or really awful, depending upon, people's abilities, how much time they're willing to invest in it, and learning to do it more effectively. And I think in those places where people do it well and know how to do it, then it's a beautiful and wonderful thing. And of course, I mean, in terms of Christian drama, drama companies, I mean, Salt Mine Theater Company continues to do brilliant work. As a matter of fact, they took my rhyming Bible and we turned that into a musical, which is just amazing. Really, really well done. I mean, and all credit to them, to the person who wrote the script, because they took it and just transformed it. And of course, you've got other Christian theater companies doing brilliant work as well.
It's nice to see the arts coming through or staying. Art's always been important, I suppose. Hasn't
Yeah.
It? But
Well, of course, we've got the big spoken word thing now as well, which a lot of friends of mine are involved with. So the kind of sort of slam poetry on the edge of, not rap, I suppose, but a kind of different way of getting it across, but doing it inside of in a kind of more contemporary way. There's a lot of artistic expression out there.
Yeah. And have you done any secular writing? It sounds a strange expression, but
Writing for the general market.
Yeah.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, one of my best-selling books was called The Wolf Who Cried Boy. Yeah. And it was written initially for Penguin Putnam in the States, and it used in schools, all over the States, as a way of kind of talking about how you can take a traditional tale and sort of turn it on its head. It was even a question on the American game show Jeopardy!
Really? Oh, fantastic.
Yes. Yeah, this was about 10 years ago. I got all kinds of Facebook messages from people saying, "How did you get on Jeopardy?" And I'm just like, I had no idea I was on Jeopardy. But it was one of the questions, which is kind of cool.
Gosh, is that your greatest claim to fame?
There you go.
Yeah.
I had
That's awesome.
question on Jeopardy.
I misphrased that question. It should have been the other way around if it was on Jeopardy.
That's right. Yeah.
I did read a statistic about, because you did a load of stories for the YouVersion Bible app. I'm sure many of our listeners have heard of the YouVersion Bible. And I read a spurious statistic that said 100 million downloads.
Yeah, that's actually true.
Wow.
Yes,
extraordinary.
That's actually true. Yeah. And that was a great privilege to be involved with that. I mean, loads of people obviously contributed to it. The people who designed all the animation, the illustrators, and all of that. But to have been involved in that project was brilliant.
So busy, obviously, still keeping very busy, but living in a lovely part of the world. You talked about working on cars and music and reading. Are those still how you spend your spare time?
Yeah, pretty much so.
Yeah.
I've got an old Mazda MX-5, which I knock around in when the weather's decent. It's like 30 some years old, so it's an early one with the flip-up headlamps.
And they were good, yeah.
And that's the best one, I think. So monkey around with that. My grandson has just started driving. His test is coming up later in the month, so he's got a Fiesta, and so I've offered a bit of advice with the few things that needed doing as well. So it's good.
At least still cars that you could work on.
You can't muck about with cars these days.
No,
it's just
you
a
can't.
computer, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just it's sad, really. I mean, I realize it makes them more efficient, etc., and safe, etc. I mean, my Mazda doesn't have any airbags, doesn't have any brakes. It's got a steering wheel and seatbelts. That's it. So you just got to be careful.
Well, it's been quite a page turner so far, Bob. And if I take a sneaky look a bit further on, I can see that we're fast approaching the chapter entitled "Fabulous Take-A-Pew Dinner Party."
Yeah, all right.
Which is very exciting. But we can't skip straight to that just yet, because first we have to peruse the little game that we call My Favourite Things.
My favorite things.
Yes, this is a very easy game, Bob. We simply give you a series of categories, and all you have to do is tell us your favourite thing in each.
As easy as ABC.
Okay.
And our first category is always your favourite book of the Bible.
My favorite book of the Bible. Oh boy, that's a tricky one. I'm currently doing a retelling of the book of Mark, so I'll take Mark. Only because there is this kind of energy in the book of Mark that it's kind of like, okay, we got to get through this. It's so important that everybody hears this story. So boom, 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 boom. This is what Jesus does. And I think that's just wonderful. It used to be Luke, to be honest with you, because I kind of like the fact that it's sort of stretched out and you had the birth narratives. But having spent some time in Mark now, I'm just really excited about the energy that's in the book.
Yeah, it is. It's a real machine gun gospel, isn't it?
It is, very much so, yeah.
Yes, sounds ridiculous, but it's true. If you had to go Old Testament?
Old Testament. Oh,
You
Old
must have spent
Testament.
so much time.
Well, I have. And Old Testament gets tricky. I'm going to go for Daniel because the storytelling in Daniel is extraordinary. As a storyteller, you look at the way those stories were shaped, and they're just They're just beautifully done. It's got everything that a contemporary storyteller would include in a story to make it work. So I would probably say Daniel, and Jonah as probably a very close second. Again, the level of storytelling is phenomenal, and the ending is just brilliant.
Very good. Right. I think it's the first time we've had Daniel.
Yes,
actually.
the first mention, I think, yeah. So now, Bob, we've obviously spoken a lot about storytelling, and so naturally we would like to know your favourite staircase.
My favorite staircase.
Yes.
Oh,
That's
that's
an
a
obvious
tricky one.
Yeah.
My favorite staircase. I think it will be the staircase at my son's house in Pittsburgh,
Oh.
because he married the daughter of one of my best friends. All right. And they lived together when they first got married in two halves of a semi-detached place. Duplexes, they call them over there. But anyway. And when Chris and Molly, my son and his wife, decided that they wanted to move out of that part into a place with a sort of a better school district, it left her parents in a kind of quandary. They had always lived with somebody next door who they knew, because her, Debbie, the mother-in-law's wife, or mother, had lived there. This is getting convoluted. Anyway, she had lived there before Chris and Molly moved in, passed away. They moved in after they got married.
We got you. Yeah,
You got it. Okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, they bought this house, really big house, further out in the suburbs, and it had a 2-car garage underneath, and then a separate 2-car garage next to it, because the previous owner really loved cars. So they had the basement, or they had the 2-car garage underneath them, turned into a flat where Molly's parents could move and live. So the lovely thing about the staircase in Chris and Molly's house is that I can go upstairs to my bedroom when I'm visiting, downstairs to see them and their kids, and then further downstairs to see my best friend, so that we can watch American football games together.
What a connection.
Well,
yeah.
Multifunctional staircase.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
It really is cool.
You've turned a really daft question into a really good story.
Happens every time.
Every time.
A ridiculous
Yeah, it's
category.
funny that, isn't it?
That's great. Stairs are great, though.
Yeah, stairs are great. Yeah.
Yeah. Very good.
Right.
All right. Well, our third category is always your top 5 films. So, top 5 films.
Now, see, I thought very long and hard about this, because you kind of warned me that this was going to happen, and I kind of settled on top 5 filmmakers.
Oh, okay.
And then I got stuck trying to pick out what my
Which of
favorite
them
films
were.
were.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start with the Coen brothers.
Right.
And I'm going to start with The Big Lebowski, which is my favorite Coen brother film. Jimmy, the father-in-law of my son, he and I have been to umpteen showings. As a matter of fact, Chris came along once as well, and we all wore bathrobes, because that's what you do when you go see the Big Lebowski. So it would either be The Big Lebowski or Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Those two films would be, yes. Okay, right, so okay. That's the Coen brothers. I would have to say probably The Tree of Life, which is Terrence Malick. And it's completely opposite. The Big Lebowski is ridiculous. Tree of Life is one of the most beautiful films I've ever seen. It's got a 20-minute non-spoken section that's basically the creation story. It's unbelievable, and it's about this family and just that kind of nature of spirituality as it works its way through the life of a family. Okay. It's an amazing, amazing, beautiful film. His films are always really long and really just poetic in terms of the cinematography, just gorgeous stuff. He did a whole series of films kind of along those lines, but I think Tree of Life is the best one. Probably one of Miyazaki's films, so it would either be My Neighbor Totoro or Spirited Away. You know, the animated film. He's like, the Japanese Walt Disney, and his stuff is just, again, phenomenal, beautiful, has always used traditional animation, never went to digital animation. So everything's drawn by hand. Absolutely gorgeous. One of Wes Anderson's films, probably. So I will go with The Fantastic Mr. Fox, although The Grand Budapest Hotel would be a good second. And finally, see, this is the tricky bit, because I really like, the McDonough brothers, the two Irish directors. So like Calvary, which is an amazing film, or The Guard, or even Banshees of Inisherin, the more recent one. Yeah. My mates and I went to Bruges just because we liked the film In Bruges so much. So, I mean, his films, I think, are really standouts as far as I'm concerned. And I think I'm there.
Yeah,
There's at least,
that's it.
there's at
Yeah,
least
fantastic.
5 films.
Yeah.
You know.
So you can always tell, actually, when you have a film buff or someone who's into the art of it, because A, you talk about films that I've never heard of, and B, they're all so well informed.
I just love them.
critiques of the art.
Hot Fuzz. That was the last one.
Oh right,
Oh, Hot Fuzz. Yeah.
at the other end of the scale.
The other end of the scale.
have
Well,
Hot Fuzz.
I go to Wells a lot, and of course
Yeah.
it's meant to be set in Gloucestershire, but it's all shot in Wells.
Oh, is
so
it?
if you wander around Wells, you can see all the spots
Right.
in the film. Oh,
Beginning of August,
learning.
we're going to somewhere near Wells, actually. So might watch the film beforehand, so we can then have a look around.
it's genius. It really is. You know, that Cornetto trilogy thing. You know, yeah, brilliant.
I did rewatch it actually only last week, funnily enough.
Well, Hot Fuzz.
Great film. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the Wells is missing their trick. They should have something that happens every day where they recreate the battle scene in the middle of the town. You know, where the guy pulls out the shotguns and he shows up on the horse. It's just brilliant film.
Yes, it is very funny. Anyway, very good.
Brilliant. Now, our penultimate category is, in fact, 8 categories that we call the Great 8. A vehicle of such insight that it's recently been awarded a certificate of supreme excellence by Psychology Today magazine.
Yes, true. May or may not be true. Yes. So here we go. 8 quick fires. Don't worry, these are quick fire categories. So this is going to be difficult. Starting with your favourite author.
My favorite author. Oh
That's
boy,
a tough one. isn't it?
here we go. This is
You can give us a few if you like, given your speciality.
Well, see, we'll go back to Lewis again
Yeah.
because he was, such a seminal influence. And you got to say Tolkien basically in the same breath. Frederick Buechner, Marilyn Robinson. I don't know. I'll stop there. Tim Winton. Okay.
Yes, I imagine. I thought that could be
Yeah.
quite tough. But there's a few to choose from.
There's a
Anyway,
few to choose from.
Right,
Moving swiftly on. So, favourite type of food?
Oh, favorite type of food. Again, I mean, I just love to eat. So it's just, oh man, that's so hard. People are doing wonders with macaroni and cheese these days.
Yeah, absolutely.
I will go with macaroni and cheese.
Fantastic.
macaroni cheese. Perfect. Your favourite television programme?
Breaking Bad.
Oh, okay. Nice. Good choice. Like
good
that.
one. Favourite sport?
American football.
Okay, your favourite band or musical artist?
Oh, again, this is just, it's almost impossible. Okay. I suppose Van Morrison would be at the absolute top of the list if we're going like sort of legacy. Let's go for Van.
Okay. Favourite holiday destination?
It's just, I don't usually go on holiday. That's the weird thing. I was raised in a family where my dad was self-employed, so we never went anywhere. So I never really kind of got into that. But I go to lots of nice places when I go to work. I've been to a lot of nice places as a result of work. And somewhere in the Middle East. Been to Dubai on several occasions. We'll go with
great.
Dubai.
We'll take that.
Nice. Yeah, we had a very nice time in Dubai. Excellent service in Dubai, I found.
Yes.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Right, your favourite chocolate bar?
Oh, favorite chocolate bar. This is tricky. Favorite chocolate. It would have to be somebody sort of like dark chocolate. So maybe Dove bars. I don't know. They do a dark chocolate. That's up those.
Right.
Yeah.
Favourite board game?
Ooh, favorite board game. Can I go for a card game instead? No, it has to be a board game.
Board game would be preferable.
Would be preferable. All right, then it's going to have to be something like Scrabble.
So, favourite card game is?
Taco Cat Goat Cheese Pizza.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Never heard of that.
Never.
It's a great game.
sounds a
it's
good game. Sounds
absolutely
fun.
brilliant.
Does it?
You have to research that, listeners.
Yeah,
You'll
that's
have to
another
listen
thing
to
we have
that.
to research, yeah.
Right, our final category, Bob, is always multiple choice.
Okay.
I'll give you 3 possible answers.
All right.
And today we'd simply, Bob, like to know your favourite Bob. So 3 possible answers. Legendary comedian and comic actor Bob Hope.
Yes.
Beach Boys classic tune Bob 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 Barbaran. Or a bobble hat.
Oh, that's a bummer because I had one, but it's not on the list. We'll go with a bobble hat.
Bobble hat.
Yeah, I was going to go with Bob Mortimer. I mean, you can't
Oh,
beat
yes.
Bob
Bob
Mortimer,
Mortimer.
who does his own, dentistry. Yes.
It's yes. Well, I think if we were an open field, I think Bob Mortimer would be commendable. There's lots of famous Bobs.
loads of
When I was
Bobs, aren't
thinking about that, they come up
Yeah.
with lots of Bob Marley and Bob Seger, lots of musical Bobs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Bob
Anyway.
the Builder. Yeah. Sorry.
Bob the Builder.
Bob the Builder.
Indeed, yeah.
Anyway, so not the Beach Boys and not Bob Hope. Bless him.
Yeah.
But Bobble Hat. Bob Mortimer in a bobble hat, which
Yes.
I think I have seen. I think I have seen that. Anyway, well, I think that my favourite things would be the bedrock of any bestseller, I'm sure you'd agree. But I believe that I can almost smell a savoury aroma emanating from the pages, and that must be because...
It's the fabulous Take a Pew dinner party, the miraculous Take a Pew dinner party. The food is quite irrelevant and some of the guests are odd. It's the impractical, fantastical Take a Pew dinner party.
Oh dear. Now, Bob, this is no trenchman's diary because for this particular dining extravagance, as we say, the food is quite irrelevant. And that's because the most important part of your fabulous Take a Pew dinner party is the company. A quick reminder of the rules. Obviously, you can have all of your family and friends at the party, but there remain 4 empty chairs for you to fill.
Yes, and to do that you have to select one person from any time in history, dead or alive, a cartoon character, and a non-domesticated animal. And then on the final chair we find a gramophone player which will play the single piece of music of your choice throughout the dinner.
All right.
So, Bob, your first choice, the one person from the whole of history that you would choose to join you for dinner. And remember, it can't be anyone who appears in the Bible or any of your family.
Right. Okay. Well, again, I thought about this, and there were 2. Either Gerard Manley Hopkins or Nick Drake. Because, much like Van Gogh, neither of them ever realized how important their work was, because they became really important after they died. So, famously, Hopkins, I think, had 1 poem published, and it wasn't until well after he died that the poet laureate decided to make his work known, and he became incredibly important as a result of that. And of course, Nick Drake died feeling he was a failure, and yet, his stuff continues. So they just did a compilation album of people, a tribute album to him that just came out last week, and his work is so seminal and so important. So I would love to be there, and to simply say, listen, what you did was incredible. You might not you couldn't have looked back at your life and thought that, but the difference you made was just so important. That's why I'd love to have them.
That's right. Well, and I think you can have both of them.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
Do you think they'd get
Yeah,
on?
I was going to say.
Yes, I think they would actually. They were both famously actually quite quiet people, and both actually quite, troubled, I suppose. One could say. Hopkins always trying to decide whether or not his calling was to ministry or to his art. And Nick Drake, I think, just it's a lack of confidence with regard to his art. So, yeah.
I read about Gerald Manley saying he was always true to his own ideals. And I thought,
Oh, he was.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and that's why he became so important, because the nature of his poetry was such that it was out of its time. It preceded really what would have come later in the 20th century, but even he didn't know that, nor did anybody else really. It's just that he kind of paved the way without even knowing it.
Well, it's a jolly good start. And
Yeah,
to complement that duo, we have a cartoon character.
Yes, I would like to have Bandit, the father from Bluey. And I just think that he's a fantastic example of being a father. It's absolute genius. The guy who created it used to work on Peppa Pig, so he was living in the UK at the time, and he has since moved back to his native Australia. And he was really frustrated with the way that Peppa Pig's father was portrayed, in the cartoon, because he was always a bit of an idiot. But he looked at his own experience with his own children, and they engaged in a lot of imaginative play. And he thought, well, surely there's a place for a father figure in a cartoon that isn't an idiot, but is, he's a bit goofy, but who actually is a good role model. So that's what the father is in Bluey. He engages with the 2 daughters, the 2 dog daughters, in an imaginative way, And he's still a really good father figure. He's still respected, but there's also a playfulness to him that really works. And I just think it's a great series. Yeah.
So it'd be great fun by the sound of it.
Oh, it's an amazing series.
Yes.
Yeah.
What do you think they'd talk about? Would it be quite a serious conversation, do you think? Or do you think
Over dinner.
Over dinner
just
with
have a
Bandit?
fun.
No, I don't think so. Because he does so many ridiculous things in this show. I think we'd probably just explore those.
Yeah.
And how he came up with the ideas of, goofing around with his kids. Yeah, it's good.
Cool.
Very
Sounds
good.
good. What about, finally, a non-domesticated animal?
All my life, the pangolin has always been my favorite animal.
Pangolin?
Yeah, I was a bit depressed when the pangolins were partly blamed for COVID, because they were some of the animals that were being consumed, in the wet market in Wuhan. But I don't think pangolins were responsible. I've always thought pangolins were just quite amazing creatures.
They are somehow mysterious. Aren't
They are. Yeah.
It's almost like they're another animal in disguise, isn't it? And
Yes, it's that kind of
within them
somewhere
somewhere
thing.
there's something else going to come out any second.
Yeah.
Very mysterious.
Interesting.
Yes.
And they're quite slow moving.
I don't know, to be honest with you.
yeah.
I mean, I
Well,
don't
not if they're on
know.
a motorcycle,
No,
obviously.
not
You go
fast.
quite
No,
fast.
no.
What do they eat? What do pangolins eat?
I think they eat like little insects and stuff. I
Insects
think they are just a scaly anteater.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be rather. I think that'd be rather. Yeah, it'd be more manageable than say a tiger or something, wouldn't
Yes.
it? I think?
Oh, yeah. Oh, gosh. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Okay.
Yeah.
So to accompany all of that, which sounds like quite an extraordinary collection of beings, we have one piece of music that has to play repeatedly throughout the dinner.
Again, I had to whittle it down to two.
Okay.
So it's either Van Morrison's "Summertime in England." Oh, it's one of my favorite tracks of his.
Yeah.
Or there's a band called The National, and on their newest album, there's a wonderful song called "New Order T-Shirt," which it's a beautiful slice of life thing where he just reflects on his relationship with his wife, and it's all like snapshots, and it's just beautifully done. So yeah.
Which
One of
do
those
you
two.
think would stand up to 2.5 hours?
Oh, it would have to be "Summertime in England" because
Yeah.
it's already like 12 minutes long.
Long, yeah,
Right, yeah.
So yes, yeah.
And probably slightly easier on the ear.
Uh,
probably, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, but it's just, it's longer to start with, yeah.
Yes, yeah. Very good. Well, I hope you get to enjoy such an excellent soiree before too long. I'm sure you will. And as the plates are cleared from the table, let's return to the Book of Hartman and take a little look into the future as we ask you...
12 years from now, what would you like to be doing? Or would it mainly be the same? Or would you rather be canoeing, for example?
Yes, just an example.
Yes, Bob, what would you like us to be talking about if we were having this conversation with you 12 years from now?
Seeing as I'm 67 now, I'd quite like to be alive. 12 years from now. I don't know. I mean, I guess I see myself continuing to write. So I guess I'd like to still be talking about, what comes next in terms of the books, etc. By that time, though, I mean, certainly the oldest grandkids will be in their 20s. Malachi be pushing 30. So, I don't know, extended family, that sort of thing.
More books on the shelf?
More books on the shelf.
Have you got all your books, actually, on a shelf? Or-
They're scattered around. There's a lockup back in Pittsburgh, so there's a lot of it. Yeah, there's a lot of them
The
there.
lockup, yeah.
Yeah, and there's translations and all that kind of stuff. Once upon a time, yes, they were all on a bookcase somewhere, but now they're sort of in boxes. Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
Your family's split between here and the US, is it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So give you an excuse to travel, and yet you've got them around you as well. So.
Yeah, well, it's wonderful, really.
Yeah.
I'm going off to the States in September, so I'll be there for a month hanging out with. It's the beginning of American football season, so
Yeah.
Jimmy and I get a chance to watch at least 4 Steelers games together. So yeah.
That's great. And I did notice that certainly one half of the family have gone fully dedicated to biblical names, haven't they, for their children? That's very
Oh
impressive.
yeah. Malachi and Leah and Jacob. Yep.
Perfect.
It is.
I was impressed by that.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great.
Well, interestingly, when Malachi was born, and he's like 17 now, so there weren't that many Malachis about. I think there are a few more now.
Oh,
The
really?
names caught on a bit, but back then, You know, he was the only Malachi in his like preschool and things like that. And, you know, they call him Malachi, things like that, because they wouldn't know,
Malachi.
you know, how to pronounce it. But yes, biblical names.
Yeah, no, it's very it's commendable.
It is, isn't it? Just on the Steelers, are they any good? Are they doing well?
Yes, they've had a few. They always have at least a winning or a 8-8 sort of a season, and always either just make it into playoffs. They're very good. They've got more Super Bowl victories. Well, them and the Patriots are tied at 6.
Oh right.
So it's they were a very storied franchise back in the 70s, but yes, they have been not as good recently as they have been in the past, but this season's looking actually pretty good. So.
Sounds like a great trip,
Yeah.
and we wish you every blessing wherever life and the Lord may take you, Bob.
Thank you.
Now, our book thus far has encompassed biography, psychology, and domestic entertaining. But as we near the end of our volume, and you possibly near the end of your tether, it turns into a rather more academic.
I thought you were going to say life. Getting back to that 12-year thing. What do you know?
Yes, well, as it may be. But it turns now into rather more academic theology reference work.
Uh-oh.
Yes, shortly, Bob, would be very grateful if you could share your spiritual pearl of wisdom. But just before that, we have another question which has arisen in our in-depth biblical studies. That's right, it's the little part of the show that we like to call...
Is it true? Is it true? Is it true? Is it true?
Yes. Don't look so worried, it's fine.
Okay.
Is it true? And this time, Bob, our attention has been drawn to the suggestion that while the Bible is littered with stories of human frailty, there is one condition which was clearly felt to be beyond the pale, and therefore any reference thereto was expunged, and that is short-sightedness. Of course, we read of people sadly afflicted by complete blindness, but myopia is notable by its absence. And this, it is suggested, explains a number of strange episodes. These include the apparent courage shown by the young David in the face of a giant. Clearly, a short-sighted David had absolutely no idea quite how big Goliath was. Equally, there's the unfortunate criticism laid at the feet of friend of the show, Doubting Thomas, who was actually not being sceptical in demanding to touch the risen Jesus, rather that it was simply all a bit of a blur. And then this story perhaps shines new light on the sad case of the seriously myopic Delilah, who, in disastrously shearing Samson of his strength, actually believed herself to be helpfully cutting the hair of the woman next door, who, we understand, to be fair, was a large and unusually hirsute lady. Sorry. There are, I am sure, many more examples to support this contention, but Reverend Bob Hartman.
Is it true? Is it true? Is it true? Is it true?
So yes, is it true?
Well, can I say, it's particularly well observed.
Thank you.
All right.
Cracking job, yeah.
But I don't think it's true.
But there is there, I don't think there's any mention of people not being able to see very well in the Bible.
As far as I can tell, no. Well, except for the chap. Remember the chap who Jesus, he restored his eyesight, but for a short period of time, all he could see were people that looked like trees.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So there is a brief moment there where it could have been, short-sightedness. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think that's the only example I can think of.
Yeah. It is. I think it is quite intriguing.
Yeah.
And I'm presuming the whole of Noah's family, they had to send birds out. They couldn't just look to see if the flock
That's right. That's very good. Yeah.
It's very strange. But maybe I guess they maybe didn't have as much short-sightedness back in those days because people didn't sit in front of computers.
Well,
and
that's
stuff,
true,
did they?
actually, yeah.
Well, maybe they didn't realise. I mean, you know what I
You
mean?
didn't know, did
You
you?
didn't have eye tests.
No,
You
you
know?
didn't have glasses in the devices. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
That's very true. Anyway, well, thank you for your very sensible thoughts on that one, Bob.
Yeah.
I think next time I study the Bible, it is perhaps I who should wear glasses. Yes. But with that, perhaps you could bless us with your spiritual pearl of wisdom.
It's a spiritual pearl of wisdom.
Well, okay, I'm just going to give you the one that I've been given to folks on the Open the Book tour these last couple of weeks. Psalm 78 says, somebody passed my story on to you. Your job is to pass that story on to the next generation so they know who I am. I mean, this is sort of God's instruction. And I think that as much as anything, what we know about God is found in his story, in the narratives we find in the Bible. They're all about him. So the idea of passing on his story is absolutely essential. Not only the individual stories, but that big story, the great overarching story of God's relationship with us. There you go.
It's a spiritual pearl of wisdom.
Well, thank you very much for that, Bob. And as I turn to the final page, I would dearly like to see it was a list of contents or acknowledgements, but I am afraid to report that it actually sets out
Simon's random question.
Yes, Simon, what is your random question for Bob?
Well, Bob, faced with such a prolific author, I felt that there was only one question to ask, although it's sort of in two parts. So, my random question for you is this, Bob. Firstly, if you could spend 1 week in the life of a fictional literary character from any current or historical setting, who would you choose to be? And then secondly, which Bible story do you think that character would best fit into? So, for example, you might choose, say, Elizabeth Bennet from Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, spending a week in Georgian splendour before hopping on board with Noah to help to keep up the standard of ark-based etiquette.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Oh, and there was no time to think about this one ahead of time.
No.
Let's see here. Let's take Frodo and put him in the book of Exodus somewhere, accompanying the children of Israel, and just see where that goes. I don't know. He may have a ring to deposit somewhere, or he may not. But maybe he has to lose the ring somehow in the Red Sea or in the Jordan River. I don't know, whichever one they cross. Yeah. Let's do that.
It's very. I love the combination of that, because they're quite both saga journeys, aren't they?
They are.
As opposed to saga holidays, which is a completely different thing. And I think it would fit in rather. Just you can imagine Frodo scurrying along at the back, and the Israelites all moaning about this. And
that's right, tiny little fella.
That would be.
Try to keep up with the rest.
That would be great. And what would it like being Frodo for a week in Lord of the Rings? That would be interesting.
It depends which part of the Lord of the Rings.
I suppose.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Beginning or end, you'd be all right. That stuff in the middle.
Yeah. So the last week of
That's
Lord
right.
of the Rings is Frodo.
When he gets home, that's right.
Yeah, absolutely.
He has to put his little hairy feet up. Yeah.
Yes. No, I think that's a very, very good shout. Yeah. Sorry, it's a bit of a difficult random question. Are there any other literary characters, classic literary characters that you think would be nice to inhabit?
Oh, wow. I don't know. The thing is, I mean, you go over to Narnia, and you don't really want to be Aslan. I mean, obviously Aslan's above and beyond. He's obviously the Christ figure in the book, but I don't know, to be one of the kids, discovering what this amazing place is like and who this amazing creature is. I mean, I'm always knocked out by the fact that successive generations continue to come to the Narnia books and continue to love them, Philip Pullman notwithstanding. But you've got this kind of wonder that is invested in the stories that I think continues to draw children in, and I think to be one of those children, as happens in fantasies, isn't it? To be set free from the parental constraints and to be there and really having to be on your own in an adventure. That's always been the wonderful thing about fantasies, hasn't it? And so, yeah.
And it's interesting how you appear to be drawn to those fantasy type, Lord of the Rings and Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, as opposed to Shakespeare or Dickens.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, Dickens did run through my head, but there's so many characters to mess with there. Yeah. You're kind of like, no, we'll just stick to that.
That's a great shout. Very well negotiated, I think. So. But in any case, that was
Simon's random question.
And so, Bob, it is indeed time to close our little Take a Pew book. It's been wonderful to chat with you. Thank you for having us, and thank you for being on the show.
It's my pleasure. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
And dear listeners, thank you for being with us. If you've enjoyed listening, why not subscribe to the show wherever you listen so that you don't miss out on upcoming Take a Pew fun. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and now even Toctic. Simon and I will be back with more fun, faith and flights of fancy very soon. But in the meantime, it's Toodlepip from me.
And Tatty Bye from me.
Join us again next time as we Take a Pew.
Take a pew.